Our third panel is Taking India to the World, and we have an absolutely power-packed panel with us. First up, can we have Mr. Mario Voigt, who is a member of the German Legislative Assembly, Mr. Nikolai Kudashev, who is the Ambassador of Russia to India, Mr. Andre Arana Correa Dologo, who is the Ambassador of Brazil to India, Mr. Federico Sales Lotfe, who is the Ambassador of Mexico to India, Mr. Amrinder Katua, who is the former Secretary of the MEA, and our moderator for the session, Mr. Samir Saran, who is the President of the Observer Researcher Foundation, or ORF.
So thank you very much for joining us. And in some sense, I think this is an important panel because while we celebrate the idea of New India and while we work towards building a New India, it is important to keep in mind that the message of New India, the brand of New India is also communicated to the stakeholders who are most important, which is our international partners. India in the last 6 years has seen a number of developments. The first, of course, we have seen a very enthusiastic democracy give Prime Minister Modi a mandate twice. We have seen some very bold political and economic policy initiatives which are resetting our economic and political pathways. We have seen a lot of heated debate and dissension as well, be it the issue of Kashmir, be it the issue of citizenship registry, what you are seeing today, or be it some other matters. India has seen a very rich and lively political and economic transformation in the last 6 years. From each of your perspectives, and I'll come to Ambassador Katua in the end, but from each of your perspectives, the respected diplomats in Delhi, how is this New India implicating your relationship with India? What is the brand that you believe India has begun to demonstrate in the last 5 to 6 years, and how does it change the dynamics of your relationship? So let me start with our friend from Brazil, Ambassador Lago. New India and Brazil, the contours and textures of the dynamics and relationship.
Thank you, Samir. I think that as Brazilian ambassador, the first thing I have to say is that the fact that my president was invited to be the chief guest of Republic Day in a month symbolizes very much how India wants to go to areas where it doesn't have a very strong traditional relationship. I think you mentioned the issue of the brand. I think that there are many dimensions into that. One is that the brand a bit refers to the expectation of India as an actor, as a contribution to the new world that is being built at the moment, and is something parallel to the classic, the great issues and the very direct, complex challenges that India has been facing in its region and also in already the traditional agenda. I think that we are living in a very interesting world in which countries are repositioning themselves much more than probably they were expecting to. And this is the big challenge for a country like Brazil or a country like India. When we were doing BRICS, for instance, I have my neighbor here from Russia. BRICS, why? We were questioning in the beginning, the Bretton Woods institutions. Then suddenly the creators of the Bretton Woods institutions are the ones that are questioning the Bretton Woods institution. So suddenly we start to defend the Bretton Woods institution. Same thing with the UN. We want another position in the UN, and then suddenly the UN also is being questioned. So I think the great exciting moment is because we are having an opportunity of finding a new position for our countries. And we wanted that for many years, but the world circumstances have changed enormously. So this is, I think, what really drives this belief that we can create a new relationship between Brazil and India.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let me move to the Ambassador from Russia. So we have traditionally been probably the strongest of friends for many decades now. But as you saw, there is room for greater depth and vitality and vibrancy in the relationship. Both the Prime Minister and President Putin recently in Vladivostok outlined a new vision. How do you think the energy of this new government in India over the last 6 years, especially in terms of foreign policy, is beginning to carve a new relationship with Russia?
Thank you so much, Mr. Saran. Well, so what is it so special about the last 5 years? In my personal take, India proves, not just says, India proves that it's a great country, it's a great partner, it's a great people. Well, first of all, the two of us, Russia and India, revitalized its commitment to establishing new multipolar world. We revitalized our commitment for new model of interstate relationship under such formats as BRICS, Russia, India, China, RIC, SCO, and you name it. Well, further on, we revived our commitment to face together new challenges and threats. First and foremost, terror of all its kinds. Well, then naturally we continue our joint exploration, our joint journey to develop the new regional architecture of security and cooperation in the basins of Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Well, bilaterally, you mentioned the special chemistry existing between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. And naturally, well, the Russian side is very much enchanted with the opportunities emerging under the Make in India programs. New regions and new parts of Russia are entering our bilateral ties, and it's a welcome development that our Indian friends are exploring opportunities emerging not only in the western part of Russia, which is more or less of a tradition, but also along the Pacific shores and even in the northern parts of Russia, such like Arctics. Well, naturally, I could continue, but I believe these brief notes could testify that this is a real relationship, a relationship of especially privileged strategic partnership. Thank you so much, sir.
Ambassador, we are delighted that Foreign Minister Lavrov will be in Delhi next month at the Raisina Dialogue, and this is, I think, the first time he is visiting the dialogue.
Yes, sir, very much. Yes, sir, very much so. And he's not only visiting India, but he would be a willing speaker. To the Raisina Dialogue Conference. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We really appreciate it, sir.
Let me move to the Ambassador of Mexico, sir, and pose the same question to you. That how has the bilateral changed in the last 6 months? What are the new opportunities or new textures that are adding to the relationship? Or do you believe we need to be doing much more?
Well, I hope you mean the last 6 years, not the last 6 months.
The last 6 years, sorry.
No, the relationship has certainly taken a new dynamic approach. Prime Minister Modi was in Mexico in 2016, and since then, around that time, we have established what we call a privileged relationship between Mexico and India. And that set the framework for what we're working on now to develop what will eventually become a strategic relationship between Mexico and India. And I think just as my colleague from Brazil just mentioned, this shows that India is extending its approach to other parts of the world, non-traditional parts of the world where it had wanted to expand its footprint, and that's a very important development. I think that in the specific case of Mexico, as I said, the relationship has become very dynamic. Since last year, we have become the second largest trading partner of India in the American continent after the United States. There's also a growing presence of Indian businesses in Mexico. Over 200 enterprises from India are doing business now in Mexico. And this is, Mexico is not one of the BRIC countries like my colleagues here, so this also speaks of India trying to diversify its presence in the American continent. We are, of course, in the same club with India, together with the other members of the panel here in the G20, and that is also something that I think is very important, because we're all trying to look towards the future and develop specific approaches to the international agenda, to the multilateral agenda, and this is where we want to work together with India to see how best we can approach that. In the specific case with Mexico, one thing that I think is very fortunate is that we will be, together with India, a non-permanent member of the Security Council in the years 2021, 2022, and it's also very auspicious that in 2022, India will be coordinating the G20 group, of which we're all members there. So I think what we're seeing right now is that, you know, the foreign minister of India has spoken a lot about expanding or the approach of it in the Indo-Pacific approach of India, and I guess, you know, this is extending its Pacific reach across the other side of the globe to the Americas, and that's a very important development.
I think India is beginning to discover the Pacific more. I think that's the important part of what has changed.
That is correct, yes.
Let me move to the Deputy Chief of Mission from France, Madame Dana Porcarescu, and I hope I get the name right. Again, I think with France, it's a relationship which is only seeing the movement north. It's a relationship that's improving every day. And again, your defense minister is going to be with us next month. How are you evaluating what has transpired in the last few years vis-a-vis the bilateral? And what are your specific, issues that you believe have transformed the relationship to what it is today?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. You know, I'm French, so I'm not going to talk only about bilateral, I'm going to talk about the whole world. This is France, we are universalists, so sorry for that, but you know, the reason why we developed this partnership is very simple. It's because we believe the global space needs to be collaborative. And we believe that all the solutions to our problems in the future are collaborative, be it security, and we are talking about a strategic partnership, but also climate and environment, and also, I would say, connectivity. For all these issues, we need to be together. So we are very strongly engaged in this partnership because we want India to play a global role. We want India to contribute to shaping the future, and we want it to be active, not only in the Indo-Pacific area. We really strongly invite India to come home to Europe as well, and to be partners with us, you know, don't stop at the Pacific, go to the Atlantic as well. Looking at this audience here, which is wonderfully young and vibrant, I believe this is the asset that we have to invest in together in the future. We have to bring our younger people together. We need to do mobility for the students, for exchanges, for human direct exchanges, and not only governments to governments. I mean, we are all in the business of diplomacy. It's good, it's enjoyable, but this is not enough. So I really believe that on the way up, we started with a very strong strategic partnership. We are now reaching out to everyone in the country, and I believe we are very proud to do that together.
Thank you very much. Dr. Voigt, you're a parliamentarian, you're a politician, someone who is, again, a student of evolution, political evolutions. How do you see the transformation, and where do you see is the biggest area of possible partnership between the European Union broadly, but Germany specifically with India?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think it's a wonderful opportunity sitting on this panel, having so distinguished diplomats here. I'm a politician. I take it a different way. And I can say India is approaching to become the most influential democracy in the second half of the 21st century. And if you see it this way, then you see chances, you see challenges, and you see choices. The chances India has from the perspective looking European outside in, it's basically you are the fastest growing big economy in the world, even though the numbers are slowing down a little, but still it's mind grasping. You have such a young workforce, which will, you call it a demographic dividend. I mean, we all make sure, or want to make sure that it doesn't become a burden, right? So these things taken together see a lot of potential and a lot of chances. But, and here comes the challenges which we are facing together. We are facing foremost a situation where we are moving from a unipolar world in a multipolar world where the 20th century's blueprints doesn't apply anymore.
I'll answer very quickly.
And if we see it this way, we basically have to find one way out. We have to find new kind of setups. And if I see Angela Merkel plus Narendra Modi, this equals soft power in the world. And this is something where we as Germans take a very special relationship towards India. Every 2 years there is a high level led by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor consultation on government. Every 2 years. This is something India just has with Germany. And this means we want to invest a lot in the choices which lay ahead. This is about trade, where we have to solve the problems together. It's about ending, I call it the Silicon Valley logic of technology, where we see a different kind of technology, tech stacks, where we have to invest together in. And there is thirdly, the other elephant in the room, the question of the aspiration which China has. And if we see these scenarios together as one world we share collaboratively, I believe we have to invest in G plus G, government plus government. We have to invest B plus B, business to business, but we have to definitely invest to P plus P, people to people. And if we do this collectively together, I believe, at least from the German point of view, and we always take it as a more European approach, we're going to be very well off, because you are a very important economic partner to us, but foremost, you are an influential democracy, and this is what we want to invest in a rule-based world order. Thank you.
I think you made a very interesting presentation, sir. And I'm going to actually use that for the next round. But before I do that, let me come to Ambassador Khatua, who's been the face of India in many geographies. He was also someone who was keenly engaged with the commerce and trade departments in trying to explain India's trade positions globally. So how exciting would it be for you to be a diplomat today?
Before that, I must make it clear that as Indians, as us, we must know what is India. Indian reality is 550 million middle class who are perpetually in the market of expectations. We have 450 million poor, always they have to be subsidized, developmental and welfareism. We have 350 public sector, rich government servants who operate with I know all attitude. This scenario is divided between rich India, poor India, urban India, rural India. Second, you have a very strong diaspora, bigger than Chinese. Their demands are more, contributions are less. All these points are very relevant before we establish our Weltanschauung, the world view, or India's position in the world. Foreign policy of India, India's positioning is just making. We should not behave as if we are big anywhere. These are our friendly countries. Each of them are great friends. They are not going to criticize us. We have to understand this and prepare ourselves.
So, sir, I think you raise a fair point. We have to be, and to be honest, I think the way I was reading the brochures outside of this particular event, and it says about the need to have conversations to build a new India. You know, this is a process underway. It is not a journey which has reached its conclusion. I think through this particular event, a young section of India wants to have consultations with partners and with stakeholders to try and glean ideas and directions for itself.
Talk to each other.
So, to talk to each other. So, being a diplomat, and with everything that's happened in the last 6 years, be it in the political front, domestic politics, international politics, economic changes, transformations and policies, is a diplomat's life easier today or more rich and complex today, explaining the changes that are underway?
See, point is that Indian diplomat must learn not to be a babu, a bureaucrat. 2, outside India, his role is basically not limited to how he's going to project India. India's export is falling. Employment is going down. How economically a diplomat will sustain India's entry into that market? 1. 2, we are talking about science and technology. In each area, like last session was about the smart city. I used to be the advisor to Prime Minister on smart cities. See, capital is not a big problem. Biggest problem is communication and transportation. Biggest problem is generating ideas and changing public perception. A diplomat's role is to bring the best practices and bring it to all of you in our society, in our states, how we can use those best practice models. That is the role of the diplomat. Third, we are talking about the cultural. When our politician, German politician, spoke about people-to-people contact, that is one of the biggest asset of India. Indian people, Indian culture, Indian civilization, that they are our biggest assets. How are we packaging it? How are we marketing it outside? How are we generating interest outside, among diaspora, among foreign populace to India? These are the issues, are very important element for a diplomat today. The role of the diplomat is changing, and now time has come. Say, for example, always in the Observer Research Foundation, I say that there is time to educate the diplomats for their new roles, prepare them.
So I think that's a very important point. India needs to have the right personnel on the job to communicate a new India.
Absolutely.
In the second round, I'm going to ask you to drop your diplomats' hats, if it's possible at all, and be critical. You are friends, so we look forward to a feedback. What are, in your minds, the 2 or 3 things India must do in the coming years if it wants to be the influential democracy that our German friend mentioned, or as Dana mentioned, a contributor to the global governance architecture, or as our friend from Mexico mentioned, a Pacific actor? What are the 2 or 3 big political or policy decisions India must take? In your mind, which are those 2 or 3 areas India must focus on? Since you are the politician, can I start with Mario first? And Mario, I'm going to come to you after this round for the presentation that you want to show to us.
No, it's all good. Don't worry.
Are you okay?
Let's have it here on the panel. It's even more interesting.
Okay. So Mario, since you are the politician, let me start with you. What are because you mentioned choices, chances. I think you stopped short of telling us the 3-4 challenges that India has to confront and embrace.
Even though I'm a German, I try to be polite. So, I mean, there are obvious challenges from outside. I named a few, which is China, which is the current trade policy between the US and to the world, and a lot of other aspects. If you look for domestic challenges, and we have seen great panels before, but at least let me name 2 or 3. One is a more general one. When you are a country of 1.3 billion people, approaching even more, you could be very much self-centered, right? And you could be very much focused on your domestic development, and which makes in a way sense, because you have so many pressing issues still ahead of you. Education, environment, developing rural areas, urbanization we just had. But on the other hand, you are approaching a global power and also facing development challenges. So, and if I just can encourage you for one, don't be too much self-centered, but looking also to the world, because the world is looking at you and inviting you to be part of it. So this is for one. The second thing is, I believe, for me it makes no sense that I'm very much doing stuff in the digital world as well. For me it makes no sense if India is the second largest digital economy and market in the world, but quite frankly there are not so much international products you are leveraging all around the world. We are talking just about Huawei, or let's say Chinese Alipay or other entities, and we are talking about Facebook and Google, but we are not talking about Indian aspirations. So there I would say you could leverage more power. And then finally, since I come from a higher education background, I believe the exchange which we have to do and to find ways to do it is to reskill people within India. Until 2022, if I cite the number correctly, over 300 million Indians have to be reskilled in order to lift them up above the poorer or low middle income wages. So this means there is a lot of potential. And if we take this together, education, more open market and free trade, and also leveraging digital potential, I believe there's a lot to talk about between Europeans and Indians.
I think those are fascinating points, and you have very gently, like a good, nice, polite German, challenged us with 3 ideas. I think this is something for the audience to think about. How many of you open primetime television and hear shows about international relations on your television? I haven't seen it on Indian TV since, I think one of my friends ran a show on CNN, many, many years ago. So I think we are so self-obsessed in some ways because of our own daily stories that we have to live through. We don't spend enough time on knowing what's happening around the world. I think that's a very important point, and that in many ways implicates our own ambitions with the world. That's the point.
If I may intervene, now I'm the politician. You see, the point is 35 million Indians live abroad. This is almost the half of the size of Germany. So this gives you already a big leverage power. And if I dive into deeper, I'm going to find that in the UK and in the US, the highest earning income brackets of minorities come from Indians. So you have already deep roots in other countries. So it just makes strategic sense for India to see the world more globally.
Excellent. Dana, can I come to you? Since you are not the ambassador, we'll blame it on the ambassador. Be free.
Well, I don't have to stop being polite here. I have to say that be open to the world and engage the world. And you have to do that at every level. So I don't want to repeat what has been said, but don't be afraid of opening India. Don't be afraid of bringing the world to you. You should be strong enough and assertive enough to go abroad and make the most of the opportunities, but open also your house here and open it because competition is not going to weaken you, it's going to strengthen you. And if you look at short term, maybe it's a little bit frightening, but everybody will get out of it better, stronger. And India will need to feed its people in 10 years' time. We'll need to develop technology to reach the other level that you're saying, leveraging. You need that. Competition can help you. I don't mean that forget every regulation. We come from a part of the world where we regulate every day and we manage to survive through it and to protect what was important for us. And I think you really should be assertive about going abroad and opening your house. Second challenge, I strongly believe this one, education. I'm surprised by the fact that the public discussion is not only talking about, not much about the rest of the world. There's no public debate about education, and I think it needs it. We need to bring not only higher education, because that's easy. These figures are easy. Cooperating between big universities, that's the easy part. But down to the skills preparation, down to the territorial aspects of education, there I believe there is a lot of work to be done, and it's not a criticism, it's an incentive.
Excellent. Ambassador.
Thank you. Well, I think, following very closely to what has just been said, especially the fact that India should not be looking itself in the navel all the time and reaching out to the world, I think that that's a very, very important point. I think that, this country is certainly helping to move the world towards the future, is moving in that direction. And I think that one of the things that it has to do in this context is to extend its footprint around the world. In politics, in helping shape the international agenda in multilateral organizations, but also in a bilateral manner all over the world, in every region of the world. We already talked about how it is extending in the Indo-Pacific, in the Americas, etc., in the non-traditional areas where India has developed its foreign policy. In economics, certainly, I mean, this is, it's certainly one of the most powerful economic countries in the world today, and will become even more so in the future. So it needs also to live up to that responsibility and to that opportunity that it has. And the question of innovation, which I think is tremendously important. I mean, you know, what India can bring to the world in terms of technology and artificial intelligence, innovation, etc., is something that all of us around the world are looking forward to benefit from that larger presence of India there. A second point that I would like to make is that historically we've always been looking at India, and I think India has looked at itself in the same way, as a great champion of democratic development and a very large democracy in a developing country, something that the Indians are very proud of, and that we have looked at it in a very with great admiration. We hope that that not only will continue to be that way, but that India will continue to have a leadership situation, especially in the context of world politics today. I think it is very important that the democratic message that India can bring to the world remain as such. And thirdly, one thing that I think, you know, building up to what I've been saying, I think that we're in the threshold of a new world order. India was not present at the beginning of, you know, right after the Second World War, when the institutions were created in 1945. It was still not an independent country. I think that 70 some years later is a great opportunity for India to take a leadership role in shaping the new agenda, the new world order that we're all expecting to see, in the reform of the international and multilateral organizations, and just the overall agenda that we're all that will benefit everybody, and that India is obviously will have a major role to play.
Ambassador, let me ask you a question, just a random question, but maybe the audience and I will benefit from it. Do you think some of these Indian innovations around technology, the RuPay card, the UPI, the payments platforms, some of our digital ID and digital ID linked government services that we are offering, do you think there would be takers in South America, Latin America, Central America around these kind of products? Do you think India has to be more aggressive in creating these solutions for others? Oh,
absolutely. I was. They're already doing it to some extent, and they're beginning to have a presence there. But it's obvious that there's a grand opportunity certainly in countries like Mexico, and I'm sure in the rest of Latin America, to benefit from something like that. I was in Mumbai 2 weeks ago, and I visited some of the businesses that are there that are doing this high-tech developments. And there's enormous things that we can benefit in our countries from what is being done and being invented and in the innovative sense here in India, and we certainly want to benefit from that.
Great. Ambassador Kudashev, can I come to you, sir?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well,
I think maybe you should use the hand mic, yeah.
Thank you. Well, naturally, without any prejudice to the independent nature of Indian policies and the strategic autonomy, I would like to put forward a couple of observations. Well, first, number one, you should definitely continue with the reform process. The results are very impressive. I first landed in India in 1999, and now I take a look around me. This is a different country. This is a different people, very much self-assured, very much well-informed, very much result-oriented. So you should really nurture this feeling. This is number one. Number two, naturally, India is not just believed to be great. It is great. But to continue as such, you need some kind of an over-horizon vision or greater sense of responsibility for world affairs. Such things never come easy. At least this was the case with us, with the Russian Federation. I believe that you could nurture this feeling. And lastly, well, there are multiple versions, multiple solutions emerging for regional cooperation. Much is being said now about Pacific Ocean, much is being said now about Indian Ocean, but there is a closer part of the world like Eurasia, where many of us belong to, and there is a special destiny of Russia. If you would take a look at the map, bring Eurasia together like an arch. Hopefully that you would take advantage of this special location of Russia and of this special nature of our bilateral ties to move further. Thank you so much.
So, invest in Eurasia, think big in terms of over-the-horizon vision, and continue to open up and reform. I think that's the 3 points.
But not limited to. Thank you so much.
Right, excellent. Ambassador Lago.
Thank you. I think mine is working. Well, first of all, I think that for any other country to have opinions of what India has to do is obviously very difficult, inadequate, because what you've been doing in recent years and with 1.2 and soon 1.3 billion people is very difficult to give to give advice or to make any contribution. But I would like to mention something, since we have to mention something that we believe is a special challenge, I think, is the issue of urbanization. This is, let's say, probably the biggest difference between the 2 big developing countries that we are. Brazil is today 83% urban. India has this incredible challenge of still being 30-something% urban. And the challenges of this are obviously extraordinary opportunities. The panel before this had a very interesting discussion about that. But I think it will have a very, very strong impact also, not only in innovation. I think this is going to stimulate the Indian economy in an extraordinary way. Its intelligence, its innovation, and I believe that the whole world is looking at it, because the scale of India, and with democracy, with all this diversity that you have, I think that you're going to present answers to things that nobody still has found the solution to. And can you imagine the impact this is going to have to the next step, which is obviously the continent of Africa, which is the next step that has to develop and has to take people out of poverty. So I think that India has to be a laboratory of new ideas. I think that sometimes India is a bit following some of the experiences of others. The scale of India, the competence of India, and the historic tradition of India, because India has always been one of the 2 largest economies in the world, except for the 200 last years. So there is an expectation that India is going to have a contribution that is much bigger than simply to continue into what others have developed and the paths of others.
Ambassador Khattua, I'm not going to ask you what you expect from India, but let me flip the question around. As someone who has heard many of these conversations, what are your suggestions for?
I would be brief. 3 points. India and its neighbors. If the relationship is normalized, every 5 years it will produce $500 billion of exports and imports between these countries. It will create 125 million jobs, and trilaterally it will attract the whole world to operate in the transfer of technology joint venture in these countries. That is the first point, India and its neighbors. Second point is India and China. China must be challenged, China must be countered, China must be engaged. It cannot be allowed to go scot-free. Like it has global ambition, India has global ambition. We cannot keep it under cover and always try to appease China. That is the second. Third is, when we are talking about globalization, with the globalization process, each country develops its own regionalization first. First, you must understand what is your inherent strength, what is inbuilt strength. Like, as we say, if I'm not a good villager, I cannot be good provincialist, good nationalist, and good international citizen. Therefore, first I must try to understand the core issues of India, which affects us internationally, and how I can benefit it by taking it out.
Excellent. So we have approximately 10 to 15 minutes, which I thought I'll leave for the audience to come in and pose questions to the panelists. So do raise your hand, introduce yourself, and pose a short question. I see a hand here right on top of the room. Try and get my attention, I'll come to you. Okay, can someone get the mic here, please?
I want to congratulate all of you. Thank you. Very heartening message that came across. One thing as a layperson I understand is, and a bunch of professionals sitting on the podium, gave this one line that came through, which is that India has a seat at the table now. And given that we have a seat at the table, do we understand that it is outside of just demographic dividends that we normally have to offer? But what I feel is that you are in fact telling us that we can show leadership in R&D, in technology, in multitudes of things. And so a compliment to you guys for letting us feel good about ourselves. And a convoluted question coming up next. So we are in fact, according to me, I mean, without getting into the history of things, Indus Valley civilization. So what that has to offer to the world is that whether it is ecology or economy, we have everything to offer, provided we understand our strengths. And if we understand our strengths, you'd find that when everybody talks about sustainability or you talk about innovation, it can come from a place which is, of course, going to take business along, but it will also take your ecology and your environment. As a planet, we can grow together. So for Indians, I believe that we need finally to be proud of our heritage. We should move away from the concept about industrial revolution and the green revolution, all that well done, or not. Let's now look at the new world order. What a great way of looking at life. Where if everybody
is there a question there? This is a long opinion piece.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So coming to the question, would you believe that India can in fact offer solutions which may seem jugaad when it comes to farming, it comes to innovation, it comes to technology also?
Okay, so can India's frugal innovation be globalized? I think I'll come to you.
It's very difficult for them.
Yeah, so I'll explain your question to you. There are a few more hands there. Let's go to them, please. Yeah.
Hi, myself Saurabh, I'm a part of celebrating New India team. Yes. And Samir, my question remained the same which you and me discussed, which I couldn't hear on this. That what is the difference to the world as seen in India before 2014 and after 2014? The concept of New India came in 2017 for Indians. So what a New India they see and a difference they see now?
Fair enough. This is a tangible question. How has India changed? I mean, we keep saying New India, our Prime Minister say New India, but do you think there is a New India or it's the old India just rebranded? Right? That's a question. There are a couple of hands there. Let's go to them.
Your Excellency, can you share your opinion about the recent development in India about NRCs, CAB and Constitutional Club? How is your opinion?
Which Excellency? There are many Excellencies here. Okay. There's one more hand I saw. Yeah, please.
I would like to thank the celebrated New India team to invite for this wonderful discussion. I'm a technology professional, so I have a question pertaining to somebody, if anybody of you can answer that. We in India are making great products. Technology-wise, we are making benchmark across the globe also. As you are aware that we have made products globally. I want to understand what should be a mindset of a young entrepreneur that he can access your markets also.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think I'll come back to you. I think otherwise I won't be able to remember every question. The last question in this round is to the gentleman here, please.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Saurabh Nangia. I am a seafarer by profession. I actually have a question to the panel and Ambassador of Brazil in particular. Sorry about that. Brazil has a huge women presence in the maritime industry, and what are some of the measures that India could adopt? We are actually doing pretty well since 2014, but in your opinion, what are few measures that we as a country can adopt to enhance that presence?
Women in the workforce, women in the maritime industry, in the shipping industry. I think that's his question. So I think we have a good set of first round of questions. Let me go around the panel. You can choose the ones you want to respond to. There's a question on the Citizenship Amendment Act. There's a question on India's frugal innovation and its potential for the world. There's a question on innovation, young entrepreneurs' access to your markets. How can they access your markets? And there's a question by the host, which we have to answer. Is there a new India or is it just talk? Have you seen something different in the last 3 to 4 years? So why don't we start with the German politician? It will give the diplomats time to prepare the right answer.
Absolutely.
but they are nurtured, the right words. I have to choose them carefully. So let me take two at least, two of the questions. So what has changed since 2014? I tell you what amazed me most was, like, I was before 2014 in Chennai, and I got like a very interesting number in my head which never left me. It was basically at a business meeting when they told me that each day 30,000 people enter the job market, which is basically a number for my home state, which holds true in a 5-year span, basically. So that's something where I always, when I talk in Germany, I say, you know what? Think about it. Out of this 30,000 people, there will be at least 10 people who are extremely smart and they come up with the greatest idea, and that they will not change the world by definition is out of any rational calculus. So this means India is challenging already. And here comes the thing which in my opinion has changed, but you know it better as you are Indians and experience it every day. My impression is that Modi gave it a very smart direction by making India also a blueprint for reaching out in manufacturing, in giving in an economical idea, liberalizing markets, opening up, doing reforms, and therefore creating a sense of urgency and direction. And I think this has changed significantly, but this is just my 2 cents when I look at it outside in. For us as Germans, it's interesting because we take the road and belt initiative of the Chinese more as a kind of substituting the European understanding, while making India more an inclusive force of let's do it together. And so that's something where I believe it has changed. The second question concerning market access, I can tell you within the European Union we are pushing hard. Part of the Indian-EU strategy is also having startups, innovators, exchanging ideas, exchanging resources, and there we believe we can make this work. But of course, it's never a one-way street, so this also means India has to open up and not build like a big, great Chinese wall as the Chinese have to the tech sector. So that's something which is a both-way street, but I can tell you the European market is hungry for Indian ideas, and we would welcome to make that. And let's give me a final remark to the lady here up front who asked what the world can learn from India. I can tell you one thing. A couple of years ago, I picked up 2 books of Amartya Sen. One was about the concepts of justice, Niti and Nada, as far as I remember or call my Hindi correctly. And the second one was about multiculturalism. And this is what the Excellency from Brazil referred to. I believe in this new world order, India has a very, very interesting skill set and cultural heritage which can help to shape not just the Indo-Pacific area, but also enhance the problem-solving capabilities of the international institutions. And that's why within the G4, Brazil and Germany and India, we are pushing also for a change within the Security Council. We are pushing for new institutions which can make this work. And if you look, for example, when it comes to how India is also shaping that, you have to understand that Europe is a very good launch pad for good ideas, and we are welcoming that, but we are also want to be integrated in your launch pad, which of a lot of young people with a lot of innovations and with a lot of cultural heritage. And these are the 3 questions I would like to take.
It's time for a Berlin-Bangalore bridge on technology. Dana.
Well, I will pick and choose. So, you know, the last one of us will have to answer the really tough question about the NRC. But I will use the privilege of that.
You're French. You're meant to answer that question. You had 5 revolutions, remember?
No, I'm a diplomat. We tend to respect the internal issues of a country, and we don't meddle into this. You invited diplomats, so you know. No, I just wanted to say what are the areas, I like the question, what are the areas where India is showing things to the world? I would take one which is quite surprising, actually space. You know what? The way India is working into space industry in very frugal way, it's inventing a new model for space exploration and space industry. There are not that many countries in the world who have space ambitions, and India has arrived quite late in the fray and free of all the tradition, and they're reinventing the way we are looking. So yes, we are coming to India to learn how to do frugal space industry, and we are very proud to learn that from you. Smart factories, same thing. We are coming here to learn, although I have to say the Germans are very structured too, so I have to grant them that too, but not only India. But we come here to...
I would like it to take it from you as from the Germans. No, I'm kidding.
But it's, so that's the way where we are coming and learning, and I think that will be my final word. What we are learning from you, it's also a little bit of humility. So for the French, arrogance, it's quite a good lesson every day. So personally, I learned that every day. You have to be humble here in India to do any kind of business. And really, for a French diplomat, couldn't get a best training than this one. And finally, for the gentleman who wanted to talk about access to EU markets, believe me, be competitive, be green, and the EU is going to welcome you, whatever you're doing. So that's a very easy one, competitive and green. And of course reciprocity, but that's for the government, not for the entrepreneurs.
You saw a little bit of the recent Franco-German dynamic there. Go ahead, Ambassador.
Thank you. I wanted to mention a little bit about this question of whether there is a new India. I actually think that, I mean, I don't know if there is a new India as such, but what there is new is a new world, and that India is called to have a role in that new situation that we are experiencing today. And that's what I think it's important, is what is, the question that should be asked is what contribution, what can India bring to the table in order to have a new rule creation that will be, as it was mentioned here about sustainability, about environmental protection, etc. All of these elements which are new in the international agenda, this is something where I think India can make a very important contribution and is called upon to make that important contribution, and we hope that we'll make that contribution. Regarding the question of the entrepreneurs in our market, certainly I think what has been said is very right. I think there's enormous opportunities in countries like the ones in Latin America. We're looking forward to receive those entrepreneurs. Not only, it was mentioned young entrepreneurs, they don't have to be young, but anybody at any age that wants to come and do business and explore the possibilities that exist also in countries that have very young populations, dynamic populations, creative populations like Brazil, like Mexico and others. I think it's very important that they move into our markets. The doors are open, the possibilities are there, and I think there are great opportunities for mutual benefits.
Ambassador Kutushev.
Thank you so much. Much was said already, just a couple of brief observations. So what's it new now? In my take, the new is miraculous, impressive tempo of economic growth. India is changing the world. It is securing 15% of world growth, thus pushing the world forward, thus changing the nature of our bilateral ties from a buyer-seller relationship to an emergence of a quite new economic structure. Thus, India is changing its position in the changing world. Thus, the new model of international relationship is emerging, like BRICS. And so we should definitely take note of it and pay due attention to it. As far as the solutions which India could offer globally, just a couple of observations, like take note of the International Solar Alliance. Isn't it an interesting idea for the renewables, and not just for the renewables only? Then comes the connectivity, the multi-dimensional notion. Like, as far as we are concerned, the Act Far East policy, Russia's Far East, the Act East policy, as far as the Southeast Asia is concerned, and the ASEAN-centric space, the North-South Transport Corridor and others, a very interesting, a very valuable experience for humankind. And naturally, such an interesting and promising idea like Global CT, Counter-Terrorism Conference, to face the challenges together and to bring together different ends. This is also a very interesting and promising endeavor in my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
So,
Ambassador Lago.
thank you. First, to answer the question directed about women in Brazil. I think this is, first of all, thank you very much, and it's true, we're very proud of the enormous participation of women in our society, but this is very much linked to the urbanization issue. All the studies show that the liberty, the access to information, the access of education that the process of urbanization brings has been essential for women empowerment. So I think it's very much linked to that issue. Regarding the, if India has changed, I think that what we can feel today in India very clearly is a sense of its future. You see when you see Foreign Minister Jay Shankar saying that India is going to have a foreign policy now already conscious that it's going to be the third economy in the world by 2030. So it's going to behave already, because most of these policies take years to be implemented. So it has to think already as the third economy in the world, and I think this is a very important change. The other change that I want to insist very much on is, and I'm glad that a German politician and a Brazilian diplomat agree on this very clearly, but the diversity of your society, your demographic bonus, and the fact that you still have so many challenges, it makes India the most interesting contemporary society in the world. You have all the possibilities in front of you. And that's why I think that we expect from India something like a disruptive behavior. I mean, it's not only disruptive technologies, etc., but your scale is so big that you have to do things differently. And regarding climate change, regarding sustainability in general, India is going to give the right answers, because we have to change. The former panel mentioned many times the issue of behavior change, what we call in the UN unsustainable patterns of consumption and production. I think that India is going to lead the world in that, and there is a great expectation in that sense.
Ambassador Khattu.
I have just one observation. We have submitted a paper in the targeted regions. If you have technology patented, different kind of technology which you want to export, every 5th year we plan to organize technology fairs. To say, for example, lots of technology in India, when they are patented, they are already sold. But we have to build up the information bank. In absence of the information bank, embassy cannot market them. Therefore, the proposal is with the Ministry of External Affairs that every 4th, 5th year we should have a technology bank marketing in the targeted regions. I hope it comes soon.
So I saw all the diplomats have sidestepped the question around the Citizenship Act, which is not a bad thing. You have the television for that. You can go home and watch the television news and choose the sides you want to choose. But I think we had a fascinating conversation over the last 1 hour with this wonderful panel. As an Indian citizen, I have 3 takeaways, and I think each of them are very valuable and will certainly shape the India story in the days ahead. The new India is required to respond to a new world order, and I think that's the common theme that we heard today, that there's a new world out there. India will have to be new, and India will have to keep innovating to be a contributor to the dynamic world order. And in that sense, our challenge as a leading power, eventually an influential great power in the second half of the century, as our German friend mentioned, will entail us to build institutions and the ability to think bigger than we have done in the past, and I think that's one challenge for us going ahead. Second, even as we remain busy with ourselves, we will have to open up and invite people into our markets, into our economy, into our politics, into our institutions. I think India as an influential global actor will have to be a global country. And I think that's going to be the second big change that India will have to inculcate in its own thinking. This is something that came across many themes from the panelists. Third, I think each of them stressed it rather politely because they are diplomats. I will be a little more blunt. I think, let me invoke the words of the Foreign Minister of India. He said it a few years ago when he was Foreign Secretary, that can India be different by being different? And I think if we are going to follow the global trend of becoming insular and exclusive, we will lose the diversity and the multiculturalism that we are known for. Brand India is a democratic, diverse and multicultural society, and we have to defend it. And finally, I think my takeaway from this conversation is that it is not important only for us to look at the specific sectors, be it sustainability, climate change, space, and many others that were spoken about, but rather the entire development experience of India as something that can be exported. If India grows from a low income to a mid-income country in the next 10 years, that India story is an exportable story. We have to build narratives around India's transformation. India's transformation is itself a deliverable for the world. So I think it should enthuse us and motivate us to do more and to do better. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation. Please join me in applauding the panelists.